There was a time when Burkina Faso quietly powered the global fashion industry, but almost nobody knew it. Soft, white cotton grown under the West African sun traveled across oceans, only to return back as expensive finished clothes that local people could barely afford. It was a system that looked efficient from the outside, but inside, it was deeply unbalanced. Then something unexpected happened. A young leader stepped into power and began asking uncomfortable questions. Why does a country that produces some of the finest cotton in the world remain dependent on foreign textile giants? Why are farmers stuck at the lowest end of the value chain? And more importantly, what would it take to change that? This is the story of a bold attempt to rewrite the rules. A story of resistance, economic strategy, and a fight to reclaim control. This is the cotton comeback. For decades, Burkina Faso has been one of Africa's top cotton producers. The crop is often called white gold because of how valuable it is to the economy. Thousands of farmers depend on it for survival. Entire communities revolve around its harvest. But here's the problem. Most of that cotton was exported in its raw form. It left the country cheaply and came back as finished products with a much higher price tag. The real profits were being made somewhere else, by large global corporations that controlled processing, manufacturing, and distribution. This wasn't just an economic issue. It was a structural problem rooted in history. During the colonial era, African economies were designed to supply raw materials to industrialized nations. That system didn't fully disappear after independence. It simply evolved. Burkina Faso continued producing cotton, but without developing a strong domestic textile industry, it remained stuck at the beginning of the value chain. And being at the beginning means you earn the least. Farmers worked hard, but their income remained unstable. Prices were often dictated by global markets. Local industries struggled to compete with cheaper, mass-produced imports. Over time, the country became dependent on external forces it couldn't control. This is the reality that set the stage for change. When Ibrahim Traore came into power, he didn't just inherit a political system. He inherited an economic structure shaped by decades of dependency. And instead of accepting it, he chose to challenge it. His vision was simple in theory, but difficult in practice. Keep more of the value inside the country. That meant investing in local processing, building textile factories, encouraging domestic manufacturing, and reducing reliance on foreign companies that had dominated the industry for years. But turning that vision into reality required more than speeches. It required strategy. One of the first steps was to rethink how cotton was handled at the national level. Instead of exporting raw cotton as quickly as possible, the focus began shifting toward local transformation. The idea was to process the cotton within Burkina Faso, turning it into thread, fabric, and eventually finished garments. This move alone had the potential to multiply economic returns. But it also created resistance. Global textile companies were not going to give up their advantage easily. They had infrastructure, capital, and decades of experience. Competing with them meant stepping into a space where the odds were not in Burkina Faso's favor. At the same time, there were internal challenges. Building factories requires investment. Training workers takes time. Developing supply chains is complex. And ensuring quality that can compete internationally is not something that happens overnight. Despite all this, the push continued. Local industries started receiving more attention. There was growing emphasis on supporting domestic entrepreneurs. The idea was not just to produce cotton, but to build an entire ecosystem around it. An ecosystem that creates jobs. An ecosystem that retains value. An ecosystem that gives the country more control over its economic future. For farmers, this shift carried new hope. Instead of being tied only to raw cotton prices, they could potentially benefit from a stronger local market. More demand within the country meant less vulnerability to global price fluctuations. It also meant that their role in the economy could become more stable and more respected. For young people, it opened up new possibilities. A stronger textile industry means jobs in manufacturing, design, logistics, and business. It creates opportunities that go beyond agriculture. It builds a bridge between traditional industries and modern economic growth. But the journey is far from easy. There are still major obstacles ahead. Infrastructure remains a challenge. Competing with global supply chains requires efficiency and scale. Access to international markets can be complicated. And political stability always plays a role in long-term economic development. Yet, what makes this story different is the intention behind it. This is not just about cotton. It's about sovereignty. It's about asking whether countries that produce valuable resources should remain dependent on others to profit from them. It's about redefining what development looks like in a globalized world. And Burkina Faso is not alone in facing this question. Across Africa and other parts of the world, similar conversations are happening. Countries are beginning to rethink their position in global supply chains. They are asking whether exporting raw materials is enough, or whether it's time to move higher up the ladder. In many ways, Burkina Faso's cotton strategy is part of a larger movement. A movement toward self-reliance. A movement toward economic independence. A movement that challenges long-standing systems and tries to create something new. But the outcome is still uncertain. Will local industries grow strong enough to compete globally? Will farmers truly benefit from these changes? Will the country be able to maintain momentum despite external pressures? These are questions that don't have easy answers. What we do know is that change has begun. The cotton that once left quietly is now at the center of a national conversation. It's no longer just a crop. It's a symbol of possibility. A symbol of what can happen when a country decides to take control of its own resources. And perhaps, a symbol of what the future could look like if more nations follow a similar path. Now think about this. If Burkina Faso succeeds in building a strong textile industry, what could that mean for other resource-rich countries? Could this model inspire a shift across entire regions? Or will global economic pressures make it too difficult to sustain? And most importantly, in a world where large corporations dominate so many industries, is it truly possible for smaller nations to reclaim control and compete on their own terms? Let me know what you think. And if you found this story insightful, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives like this. Like the video if you want to see more content on global economics and power shifts, and share your thoughts in the comments because your perspective matters here.